Under the stone arch, a slippery drop fell onto the rim of the barrel, and in the silence, the sound rang out like a gong. In the darkness, someone moved a torch, and a red circle fell on a row of oak staves. It smelled of damp wood, resin, and something sweet and bitter that tickled the throat. Friends, I'm glad to see you here. Tell me where you are watching this video from in the comments, and I hope you enjoy listening. The city was buzzing with anticipation for the gathering in the great hall where the estates were to assemble. The day that everyone called the 5th of November was fast approaching. Workshops rushed to complete orders, shops prepared the finest fabrics, and monastery brewers brewed thick beer. The seamstress Agnes's house was cramped. Rolls of canvas lay on the floor, dried sleeves hung on a rope, and an old carved chest lay on the table. Agnes sometimes picked it up, wiped the dust off it, and put it back, as if she were afraid to open it. She said that the chest contained the memory of a long-ago mistake, adding that this mistake would one day return, like an act that had long gone unacknowledged, but had not been forgotten. Her adopted son, a cooper's apprentice named Martin, listened without curiosity, but noticed that Agnes's eyes were alert at that moment. Martin was one of those people who went unnoticed. Short, wiry, with hands that always smelled of resin. He could tell by the sound of the hammer where the rivet was tight and where it was loose. He could distinguish the smell of raw bark from the smell of strong oak, and the smell of simple saltpeter powder from the smell of crushed ore. He didn't brag about it. It never even crossed his mind. He simply worked for Master Bedrick, fulfilled orders, delivered barrels to cellars, and returned to Agnes's house, where the warmth and steady hum of her scissors were soothing. In early autumn, a man in a cloak came to the workshop. He asked for stronger barrels that could withstand a long journey, but inside, he said, there would be goods that loved darkness and dryness. He called it goods that must not be disturbed. His hand lingered on the iron hoop, and his fingernail left a dent. Master Bedrick grumbled that the job would be done, and that the man should discuss the delicate order with his apprentice, if he had any ideas. The man took out a ring with a carved bird, said he would pay in advance, and left. Martin often thought about that ring from then on. The barrels were sabotaged on purpose. At the bottom of each one, at the man's request, he nailed 2 narrow, dry, wooden bridges so that there would be space between them. Martin didn't know why, but he smelled an unpleasant odor of grainy powder on the buyer's clothes. He didn't argue. At that time, he had no thoughts in his head about politics, princes, or the council. He was thinking about how to shorten the rivet correctly so that it would not crack in winter. Before evening, when the bell ringer in the cathedral measured out the long hour, there was a knock at Agnes's door. On the threshold lay a bundle marked with a simple twig. No messenger, no words. Agnes picked up the bundle and found a letter. The letter had no salutation. It said that a person of high rank and nobility was advised not to come to the hall for the next meeting, because good people had heard about the trouble. The letter was clearly not addressed to Agnes, but it was lying at her door. The paper smelled of soot. In the corner was a faint mark from a thumb that seemed to always wear a glove. Agnes said that one cannot keep someone else's fate like a stranger's knife in a sheath. She told Martin to take the letter to the office. He took the letter, but noticed a small drawing of a bird shining through the wax, just like on the buyer's ring. That evening, a cold wind blew in from the river. Martin, walking around the dirty square, saw Oswald's carriage, the tax collector, near the town hall. Oswald was a man who was not well liked in the city. He was cursed at in the markets, and in confession he was called a stone without blood. He walked slowly, counted on a long bone abacus, indicated how much each person had to pay, and accepted no excuses. Martin saw Oswald stop at the gate of the office, knock, wait for the guard, and hand over a bag with a seal. The guard took it reluctantly, and the door creaked as if a gloved hand had passed over it. Martin thought then that this door had no face, only cracks. In the office, the letter was received with a frown. They said that there was a lot of news like this, and that it was up to each person to decide whether to go to the hall or stay at home. Martin returned dissatisfied. At home, he saw Agnes standing over the chest. The chest was open. Inside lay an old copper circle with a bird-mark. Agnes said that once, before he came to her house, she had a year she tried to forget. She added that she got this ring from a man in a cloak who promised he would return. He did not return. Looking at the ring, Martin realized that the bird-mark on it was similar to the ring. Towards the 5th of November, the streets became restless. People discussed who would be in the hall, who would sign the new collection, who was against the grain tax. Those who had little grain spoke quietly. Those who had a lot of grain spoke loudly. In the evening, in the tavern, where Martin stopped by for a bundle of dry kindling, a drunkard made up a story about the barrels standing under the council building and smiled cowardly. Martin sniffed the sleeve of his jacket and smelled that same sweet, bitter scent. At first, he thought it was his imagination, and left. The thorn of doubt remained in him all the next day. He noticed something else. In Master Bedrick's delivery list, the last 2 orders went to the same courtyard on Scribe Street. There was a large basement there, and the same narrow-eyed guard always led the apprentices there. Bedrick said that salt and dried fish were stored there. Martin didn't object, but he noticed that the last time he carried barrels there, the basement floor was covered with thin straw, even though the salt was stored on boards and the fish was kept suspended. The straw was needed for something else, to hide traces. He felt an itch in his fingers. It smelled like sulfur, or alum, or something that doesn't like sparks. The night before the meeting, Lisbeth, the neighbor's daughter, entered Agnes's house. She was thin, and her every step was light. like that of a person accustomed to slipping away from prying eyes. Lisbeth sometimes brought bread, sometimes gossip. She was teased on the street because she stuttered. She was considered insignificant. That night, Lisbeth showed Martin a piece of cloth with the imprint of a ring with a bird on it. She found the cloth by the well where two people in cloaks liked to stand at night. Lisbeth said she heard one of them say that the wick would be long and the warehouse would be dry. The words came hard to Lisbeth, but she repeated them until Martin understood. He thanked her with a gesture and gave her a dry crust of bread. She took it and ran away like a little animal. At that moment, Martin saw in her a strength that he himself lacked. On the morning of the 5th of November, the city woke up before dawn. The bell rang a short toll. Horses snorted, chariots creaked. People in cloaks, people in long hats, people with rings entered the hall. Agnes put on a clean scarf, said that the world was held together by small things, and asked Martin not to get involved in other people's affairs. He nodded, but his hands were already habitually searching for his tool belt. He went to the Street of Scribes, where there was a lot of dirt mixed with straw crumbs. Under the wet boards of one of the doors, he was met by the same guard with narrow eyes. The guard said that the basements were closed until noon. Martin replied that he had come to check the rivets, which would swell, and the owner did not like surprises. The guard thought about it and let him pass. His face remained expressionless. The basement was quiet. Light seeped through a crack above like a thin white ribbon. A row of barrels was neatly lined up. Each one bore the mark of Master Bedrick, and some had small cuts made by the man in the cloak. Martin crouched down, placed his palm on the edge, and felt not the wood tremble, but his own hand. He took a thin knife from his belt, removed the hoop, and lifted the clamp. There was no wine, no herring, no salt. There lay a baggy load of grainy material. He took a pinch and brought it to his nose. His throat responded with a dry cough. In the narrowest gap between the two bridges, he saw a thin string smeared with grease. He sniffed it. The smell left no doubt. It was a wick. He felt cold, even though the basement was evenly warm. He restored the hoop as if nothing had happened and went outside. Boys were already running around the street, shouting about the market at the north gate. Martin went to Agnes and said that her box contained the answer to a question he didn't know how to ask. Agnes was silent for a long time. Then she took out a copper circle with a bird on it and said something simple. This sign belonged to a man who once led her by the hand across the street and said he would return. According to her, she believed him then. After that, she was left with a child in her arms and too many unanswered questions. She added that Martin had not appeared to her by chance. He had been left at the door of a monastery almshouse with the same circle. She recognized the sign, took the child, and decided to raise him. She said she did not want to speak until she saw the sign on someone else again. Martin understood two things at once. First, the mark had an owner, and that owner was connected to him. Second, the warning letter was not a joke, but a desperate signal. And if letters are ignored, then action must be taken. He decided to go to where the barrels were. But he was an apprentice, not a guard. He needed to open doors that would not open at his word. He went to Oswald, whom no one liked. Oswald was sitting at his abacus, counting coins. Martin waited until he was finished and briefly described what he had seen. He added that he was ready to show them where, but he needed access. Oswald listened without emotion. He said that to open the basement, he needed a seal, a key, and witnesses. He took an iron key, put the seal in his pocket, and called 2 clerks. At that moment, Martin noticed for the first time that Oswald was not just a coin counter. He knew how to make decisions. He knew how to go to the right place when others were arguing. The group moved toward the Scribes' Street. Lisbeth joined them on the way. She walked alongside them like a shadow, watching Oswald's hands as if she didn't trust him. Agnes crossed herself from the window in her own way, without words. Everyone was making unnecessary gestures that day. Any extra sign seemed appropriate because the air was thick. At the basement door, a guard with narrow eyes said he had received no orders. Oswald showed him the seal. The guard became confused. Oswald ordered witnesses to be brought. 2 craftsmen from a neighboring shop arrived. The door was opened. The cold from the basement wafted out onto the street. Oswald, Martin, and the witnesses went down. Lisbeth remained at the entrance. In the basement, among the barrels, Oswald asked to be shown where to look. Martin found the barrel where he had seen the rope. He removed the hoop and pulled back the clamp again. The same baggy load appeared before everyone's eyes. One of the witnesses backed away. Oswald said they should call the guards and sent the boy to do so, but he himself did not leave the basement. On the floor he noticed a narrow passage under the shelves. The rope stretched there. The end of the rope led to a thin crack near the wall, where there was a small door. There was a commotion above. A man in a cloak entered. His face was in shadow. He bumped into Lisbeth. She staggered, but did not retreat. The man asked what she was doing. According to her, he said it dryly, without threat, like someone who was sure that nothing would happen to him. Lisbeth stammered that she was waiting for her brother. The man walked past. At that moment, a torch was lit not far from the meeting room in the basement. It was silent. The wick, greased with fat, hissed, but did not yet ignite. Martin heard it because his barrel was standing close to the sound and his ear was trained. He rushed to the crack, found the rope, pulled it out, and pressed it with the wet leather of his belt. The grease got in the way, but the barrier took the fire upon itself. The leather smoked, smelled burnt, and the rope darkened without catching fire. Martin held it until his fingers hurt. He watched as the dry breath of danger died out. With this movement, he thwarted the plan of strangers. He did it quickly, without thinking. At that moment, the man in the cloak returned. Oswald stood up, covering the seal with his hand. The man stepped toward him. The light from the torch fell on the ring with the bird. Agnes kept the same symbol on her chest. Martin recognized the design without a doubt. Lisbeth, seeing the ring, retreated to the door. She heard the man say that it was too late to check, that the barrels were already where they should be, and that no one could help. His voice was calm. Oswald looked sharply at Martin, as if checking something. He raised his hand and signaled to the guards who were already coming up the stairs. This man was the one they needed to take. The man lunged toward the crack. Martin intercepted him in the narrow space. Their shoulders collided. A copper circle that he had worn around his neck under his shirt since childhood pressed against Martin's chest. The man glanced at the circle, froze, and seemed to recognize it. He said that this circle could not have belonged to a simple apprentice. He said that he had left a circle with that mark many years ago for a future child at the door of an almshouse. Martin felt the foreign year that Agnes had spoken of coming together in his head. He realized that this man was the source of his circle. In addition, he realized something else. This man was the same one who had ordered the barrels. The connection was strange and harsh. It helped him understand where to go next. Oswald understood everything from the look on Martin's face. He did not smile or back down. He stepped forward and put an iron hoop on the man. The guards arrived. Oswald said that everyone was going to the town hall, and Martin was going with them. He added that later they would need to talk to Agnes, because many things in the city were intertwined, and now they had to untangle them correctly. He said it the way an accountant talks about numbers, without unnecessary words. On the way to the town hall, Lisbeth walked alongside them, and people paid no attention to her. She held Martin's charred belt in her hands as proof that the rumor was not just a rumor. No one heard her stutter that day, because she didn't tell anyone. She just walked, staring stubbornly at her feet. At the town hall, Oswald presented the seal, brought in witnesses, and placed a piece of rope on the table. The clerks exchanged glances. The guards came out at the signal and led the man into the back rooms. Meanwhile, people were gathering in the square. Someone whispered that they were looking for barrels in the council's cellars, that someone had rushed to extinguish the wick, that someone with a bird in their hand was trying to leave. The noise grew louder. Martin stepped onto the porch and breathed in the air. He stood close to the place where everything could have ended in smoke and stones. He held his hands as if they still retained a tingling warmth. He thought it was all just a job. Remove the hoop at the right time. Tighten the rivet at the right time. Clamp down on anything that shouldn't catch fire at the right time. While the square was noisy, a man in a gray cloak without insignia came to Agnes's house. He brought a sealed letter and briefly conveyed Agnes the words of the city elder. The houses where the scribes' deliveries were made would be checked at night, and if they found what they were talking about, the masters would ask stern questions. Agnes replied to the messenger that Master Bedrick had nothing to do with it, that the apprentice had gone to Oswald, and that any witness could be called. The messenger left, and Agnes sat down and opened the box. She took out the circle with the bird and placed it on the table next to the needles. She decided that there was nothing more to hide. Meanwhile, Oswald, without waiting for a decision, gathered a group for a night patrol. The group included 2 guards, a clerk, Martin, and, to everyone's surprise, Oswald himself. This caused confusion in the market. They said that the tax collector hid behind doors and threw feathers, and did not go out into the cellars at night. But he went out. He knew where the keys were. He knew who had the seals. He knew who to call as a witness, so that in the morning no one would say that it was all made up. He surprised those who were used to despising him. On that day, he became the one whose participation decided the fate. He ceased to be just a collector. He was considered callous, but he led people into a dark passage where one must not only be able to count, but also not be afraid. They came to a large basement under the hall. There, the barrels were arranged differently. Some were hidden in the depths. Some were moved closer to the column. When Oswald raised the torch, it became clear that a rope stretched along the wall to another crack. Someone who had arranged all this had made an effort. The wick was long, laid out on shelves, so that it would smolder for a long time. It was well thought out, which meant that someone was counting not on chance, but on a slow fire. The same bittersweet smell hung in the air. Martin felt for the path of the rope with his hand, and saw that there was a barrel with an irregular hoop standing right next to the column. The wedge was slightly misaligned. It was his mistake. He had left the hoop slightly loose so that he could tighten it tomorrow. He recognized his own handiwork and realized that he could open it quickly. He didn't wait for orders. He removed the hoop, pried open the rivet, and moved the bridge. There were gray bags lying there. One bag was torn open and contained powder. Martin sniffed it, suppressing a cough, and nodded to the clerk to come and look. The clerk made a note. Oswald ordered that nothing else be touched until those who knew how to properly seize such items arrived. In the far corner, they found another passage. It led to a small storage room from which a staircase ascended at an angle. From the smell and the shoe prints, it was clear that this passage was used daily. Martin, looking at the footprints, realized that this was not a random attic, but a familiar route. He suggested checking the upper floor. The guards climbed up and entered a small room that smelled of ink and wax. It was a scribe's office. On the table lay a sheet of paper with clumsy lines of writing. It mentioned barrels, but as if they were kitchen supplies. It talked about herring and salt. It was a cover list. Oswald took the sheet, looked at the seal, and said that the seal was fake. He didn't just think so, he knew it. It was his job to recognize seals. He pointed to the border. It was slightly wider than normal. The scribe confirmed this. At that moment, it became clear that there was someone in the conspiracy who knew how to write lists and affix seals. This meant that the conspiracy extended into the office itself. The searches began at night. They went from the basement passages to the upper rooms, from the warehouse to the office. People in cloaks appeared on the stairs and in the doorways. Some tried to slip away into the darkness. Oswald, oddly enough, was everywhere on time. He did not allow the search to drag on until morning, and did not let it turn into a fuss. He divided the people into pairs, so that each had one who knew how to accuse and another who knew how to write. He prevented arguments. He did the same with taxes. He always reduced the number of accidents. In the midst of the searches, a gray-haired man came out of the far corridor, wearing the very same ring with a bird on his finger. His face was visible by the light of the torch. He was a nobleman, an advisor who was sometimes seen in the hall, but he did not like crowds. He said that something incomprehensible was going on in the basements, and added that decent people had no place in such disputes. His words were clear and calm. He looked like someone who was used to making decisions through others. Next to him stood a young man with the same symbol on his cloak clasp. They walked confidently. Martin recognized him as the one who had come to Master Bedrick. The gray-haired man said that all this was being done for a great cause, but in such a way that no one would notice. He was lying, or rather, he was not telling the whole story. There was no hysteria in him. He walked to the crack where the rope stretched. He looked at Martin and noticed the copper circle around his neck. He said that he had left that circle there a long time ago. He did not ask how it had ended up with this lowly apprentice, because the answer was right in front of him. Martin understood. This was not just a man with a ring. This was a man who, in his youth, had done something for which Agnes had paid with a long period of anxiety. This was a man connected to him by blood. And this man was carrying out a plan that would destroy those who had never held a torch or a scroll with orders in their hands. At that moment, everything became clear. Martin realized that his choice was not about his father, or not his father. His choice was about the barrel that smelled of death, and the belt that could be wet and pressed, and the people in the hall who still felt nothing. He stepped forward and blocked access to the rope with his body. He turned to Oswald. Oswald understood without words. He led the people not upstairs, but downstairs, where the rope could be cut at its source. Lisbeth, who had been standing by the door all this time, rushed to the barrel, grabbed an old rag, wet it from the barrel of rainwater, and handed it to Martin. Her stutter disappeared because she wasn't talking. She was just doing a simple task. The rag smothered the remaining heat. The wick no longer moved. The gray-haired man with the ring looked at Oswald and said that he was going too far, that he was just a simple counter, not a judge. Oswald replied that today he was neither a judge nor a counter, but the one who put the seal on the search, adding that there were enough seals for everyone. He sent the guard for help. The gray-haired man took a step back. He was not used to someone who was disliked holding power so confidently in his hands. People were already gathering outside. Some brought torches, some brought water, some brought bread. Rumors spread throughout the city that something had been found in the cellars that could not be kept under the hall. People reacted differently. Some were glad that no one would burn them. Others were angry that nothing would happen, and they would have to live with taxes again. Life was ridiculous. Towards morning, those who had to make decisions gathered at the town hall. They began to piece together the facts: barrels of powder, long fuses, forged lists, the bird symbol, scraps of cloth with the same symbol, a warning letter found in the seamstress's house, and the testimony of the apprentices who carried the barrels back and forth. Lisbeth was shown to a place by the door. No one chased her away. No one laughed at her stutter. She was asked to tell where she had found the rag. She said it, stumbling over every third word, but no one interrupted her. They listened to her. On that day, she ceased to be a shadow. They began to think about what to do with the gray-haired man. He admitted that he wanted revenge for his debts and for those he considered to be wrongly placed at the threshold of power. He spoke of a great cause, but there was a rope on the table, and his words sounded dull. Those listening understood that he was dangerous, not because he shouted, but because he knew how to wait. They understood that his plan was based on people like Martin, who quietly did their jobs and didn't ask unnecessary questions. Now such people showed the other side. When they ask questions and take action, plans fall apart. Agnes came and told them about the mug. She said that the stranger's year had returned on this day and ended. She did not ask for mercy for anyone, but said that the child left at the door had grown up and brought no trouble to the house. She said that the city owed him for the fact that many had survived. Her simple words were understood by all. No one said she was speaking too boldly. No one said she was interfering. It was a day when everything unnecessary fell away. The decision was strict and not quick. The gray-haired man was put in the tower. His assistants were found by following the trail of seals and other people's lists. Some were exiled. Some were tried. Each person's fate depended on what they did with their hands, not on their surname. That was important. The city did not want blood for blood's sake. It wanted to understand where the line was drawn. After that day, Oswald became a different person for the city. He was no longer seen only as a thorn in their side. He began to transfer taxes from poor shops to rich warehouses. He explained that if they wanted to live without explosions under the hall, they had to keep track not only of coins, but also of grievances. He said he would reduce the levies on craftsmen and check the books of those who stored grain. At first, people did not believe him. Then they saw that he had come to the market not with a whip, but with a long list of things that needed to be repaired. The roof of the hospital, the bridge at the mill, the threshold of the school at the monastery. They began to listen to him. Martin, who was more tired than ever that day, returned to the workshop. Master Bedrick greeted him sternly and said that an apprentice who sticks his nose into business is taking a risk. But then he added that in every craft there is a moment when the craft becomes more than just a craft. He said that if Martin hadn't heard the wick, everyone who drank beer in the winter cold would have drunk it somewhere else, if they were alive at all. He pointed to an empty corner and said that a new workbench could be set up there. Martin understood that this was recognition. Lisbeth began to visit the workshop occasionally and help carry rivets. Her stutter lessened because she was speaking more often in sentences that people understood. People stopped saying unpleasant things to her. They remembered how she had stopped the man in the raincoat and how she had brought a rag. She was the one everyone had underestimated. And now no one was surprised to see her standing next to the workbench. Agnes closed the box and gave it to Martin. She said that the memory of the debt was no longer in the box, but in what had been done. That was justice for her. The gray-haired man in the tower asked to see her. He was told that the woman he had once promised to return to was alive and working, and that the boy he had left at the door had become a man who saved the lives of others. He asked them to convey that he was not asking for forgiveness. He was asking to be remembered. Agnes replied that remembering did not mean repeating. The hall where they wanted to cause trouble saw many more meetings. People argued and made peace, signed and tore up papers. People understood a simple thing. Big decisions are made by quiet people who know the smell of resin and the difference between an honest seal and a basement craft. They became more attentive to such people. Not immediately, but they did. The city no longer saw barrels of powder in basements. This was not because evil intentions had disappeared. It was because many people began to recognize the smell. Like Martin, many began to watch their step, like Lisbeth. Many began to act at the right moment, like Oswald. Life did not turn into a fairy tale. It just became a little smoother. Martin would sometimes walk up to the column where the rope had once hung and touch the stone. He didn't say anything. He didn't remember faces, but smells, sounds, textures. He remembered how the leather of the belt had absorbed the danger, and how the rope had gone limp under his fingers. He thought that justice was when craft and choice came together at the right moment, and that no big speech was needed for that. You just had to be there and do your job as best you could. On the day when it got dark early again and the smell from the river returned, the city lived as usual. Someone hammered a new door. Someone tightened an old hoop. Someone hung fabrics on a bench. The 5th days of November passed as risky days pass. First difficult, then easier. Then memory becomes a thin thread that does not break. People knew that this thread was not held together by a miracle. It was held together by the fact that there were 3 of them. An apprentice with a nose for powder, a tax collector who turned out to be more useful than fame, and a girl who was overlooked, but who noticed everything. The wick that was not allowed to burn was like a test for the city. The city passed this test, not with magic, not with shouting, not with luck. It passed it with its own hands. This is what can be called final clarity. In a difficult matter, it is not the loudest who wins, but the one who knows how to feel the time and make choices on which others depend. In this choice, justice was found for Agnes, for Martin, for Lisbeth, and even for Oswald, who himself did not expect to be needed. And for the gray-haired man, justice was that his deed did not disappear in smoke, but was called by its name and received a response not with malice, but with precise action that stopped the trouble. And so the city went on living, remembering every year in the early morning how the sound of a drop under the arch had once sounded like a harbinger. People kept their belts dry, their barrels clean, and their seals in order. And they knew that sometimes the fate of an entire hall could depend on who knew how to remove the hoop in time and press the very thin rope with wet skin in time.